Ernest Holmes wrote in Creative Mind, "Do you realize that your karma is nothing but your false thinking and that the only way to escape it is to think the truth? And that brings in the higher law. When the greater comes in, the lesser leaves, because there is no longer anything to give it life to it." Take a breath and enter into the silence, sensing your union with God. Please join me in speaking the affirmation of truth on the screen with conviction. I celebrate the presence that is the basic reality of all life and the power that is mine to use for true personal and global transformation.
So this year, our theme for 2019 for all of the centers for spiritual living all over the planet is spirituality in action. And we bring that back to the very components of it, which is it begins with inner action. And that's what our teachings are all about. If we just take external action without changing the, um, the conditioned mind, the structure of belief that we carry with us, then what we do is we just simply bring forth the old patterns of the past. And so I wanted to bring this concept of karma because many of us have been exposed to Eastern religions and where they talk about karma and how your karma keeps repeating. And sometimes you have to um, it's almost as if it's something that you're stuck with, and so what we want to do is to help to distill this down to the essence of what actually the gurus of the East teach as well, which is that it's the inner world that creates the outer world. So our teachings then are about changing our inner world, our beliefs, that begins by changing our thinking, seeding our thoughts with new with spiritual truth that then produces something different, something better in our external lives. So today we're culminating this month, which is all about how to use the basic principles that we teach. We call it science of mind, but what it is for those of you who are new, it's the basic laws or principles, spiritual principles that run through really all of the world's traditions. Ernest Holmes was a great synthesizer of spiritual teachings. He read it all, the Tao, the Vedas, as well as the Bible and all of these other traditions, and noticed a pattern that ran through them. Spiritual principles, the power of the mind to shift and change our reality. And so that's what we're talking about. And today we're going to be focusing on how to put it into practice, how to use these beautiful spiritual principles in our lives. So we talked about interaction, doing the work within, and we have a beautiful tool called the spiritual mind treatment, which is an affirmative prayer. It's a method of affirmative prayer that has 5 basic steps to it. And what we do is what we're doing is we're convincing our own minds of the spiritual truth. And we're seeding that subconscious mind and helping to transform it so that we become reflections of who we are in truth, individualized expressions of God, of the Most High, of the one life, the one presence, and the one power. Yes. And so this spiritual mind treatment, basically the 5 parts, I'm going to review it quickly for those of you who are new. is that there is only one life. That life is God. We tell ourselves the truth about the one infinite, universal, creative intelligence from which we arise and which we are a very integral part. And because all there is God, all there is this one life, you could call it God, Goddess, divine presence, universal mind, whatever you want, it doesn't matter. But this one life, this one presence is awake, aware, alive. It's spontaneous spirit. It's alive, it's awake, and it lives in, through, and as each one of us. Do you feel that?
Yes, we're
Yes.
swimming in it.
Yes. And so this spontaneous spirit and the laws that also govern this orderly and harmonious universe are ours to understand and to use. And it doesn't mean we're using God. Actually, God is you could say, if anything, using us to be it's the instrument of the Most High. And I know there's some people say, but I don't want something else to use me. But this is what I know to be true, is that infinite universal presence, that source, that life which is God, is for us and in support of our greatest dreams and our happiness and all the joy and the peace and the love that we choose to create in this life. So let's breathe that in. That infinite life. I'll get myself back on track here. Okay, so again, when we focus on the spiritual truth, I was talking about spiritual mind treatment. All there is one life. That life is God. That life is my life, is the essence of it. And that life, which is God, is already perfect, whole, and complete. Therefore, the essence, the truth of who I am, is that I am whole, perfect, complete spirit, right here and right now. And the only thing that gets in the way of me knowing that are some false thoughts. That's the stuff that we're talking about when we're talking about karma. It's those false thoughts of who we think we are, what God is, or who other people are. When we wash away all of that and we stand in great clarity of who we are and what life is, then everything begins to work. That's the essence of it. So Ernest Holmes puts it in a very clear, succinct statement. He says, there is one life, that life is God, that life is perfect, and I like to say that life is perfect love, and that life is my life now. You know, if we truly embody this truth, then everything about us reflects that. Our thoughts, our words, and our actions. And our actions then become a manifestation of all that God is. And the word that we often use for that is service, right? When we hear the word service, the true essence of service is that it is spirit filled. It comes from the spiritual truth of who we are. And so it is love in action. It is the divine in action, in, through, and as us. So often when we think of great beings who dedicated their lives in service to God, we think of who? We think of Jesus, Gandhi, who? Buddha, Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa, and there's a modern day woman by the name of Saima who is also considered. What I just recently read about her, she is considered the only true. Is it guru? Is that the status in India? The only female. She's part of a long 500-year lineage of various great spiritual teachers. and she spends a lot of her time here in the United States. So there are these wonderful luminous beings, and often we think of, okay, well, those are the people who are in service to God, right? And how can I ever attain that? But the thing about this spiritual teaching is that we are already equipped to be that. We actually are already that in whatever stage we are at this point in time. But we are fully and completely equipped to be that light in the world, to be that presence of the divine in service to humanity in whatever way that we are called to be in service. I'm saying humanity, it's actually all life. We want to include also the animals and the plants and the minerals and all of the beings in all of the different realms. We all have that within us, whole, perfect, and complete. The teachings of mystic Evelyn Underhill have always fascinated me. Anybody familiar with Evelyn Underhill? She's a modern day mystic. Her writings are phenomenal. And she instructed her students on how to bring this spiritual truth of who we are into the world. And she put it this way. She said, that students are to spend time connecting with God. Uh, and she calls it being on the mountain. So when we go within and we connect with the divine and we commune with that life that we are in truth and with the all that is, it's called being on the mountaintop, right? And she said, but we must not rest on the mountaintop. Because that's what happens sometimes when people really get into the meditation and that kind of thing. It's like, I would just rather do this all day than be out in the world and have to face all that stuff that's going on there, out there. But the truth is that it's a balance like anything else. Our time on the mountaintop by turning within, doing our spiritual practice, our prayer, our meditation, our visioning, is meant to be something that we spend some time in. And then she says, don't rest there, but come down off the mountaintop and into the valley. That means into our everyday lives. We are meant to bring our mysticism, that wide awake awareness of who we are and who everyone else is, into our everyday lives. We are meant to be everyday mystics. She said that when we make this connection by going within, God is made manifest as us, and joy illuminates our footsteps. Joy illuminates our footsteps. And she said, here's our teachings, right? She said this. She said, we first need to begin with an idea that thrills us. Begin with an idea that thrills us, and then the means to give it arms and legs. Those are the two things that are necessary to be that manifestation of the Most High. So do you see how she talks about how important it is to have the idea of spiritual truth, the idea of working in partnership with God, the idea that I'm here to make a difference. I'm here to give my gifts. Whatever the thought is that thrills you, then that becomes the energy that you give forth in service. And when I'm talking about service, I'm talking about our everyday actions. Cooking, it includes cooking and cleaning and shaking hands with somebody and that smile that you give to the person next to you. All of that is part of this thing called service. But again, it's the thought behind it. It's the idea behind it that makes the difference, that makes it a manifestation of the Most High, that high vibrational frequency. A great illustration of this is Brother Lawrence. I don't know how many of you have heard of Brother Lawrence, but Brother Lawrence was a monk who came into the monastery later in his life after he'd been in the Roman army, and he'd been in service as a servant in people's households, and he one day decided to go into the monastery and become a monk. And the very first duty that they gave him was kitchen duty. And when he first started, he was annoyed with it. And he complained about it. And he just couldn't wait until it was done so he could get back to his prayers. And then one day it dawned on him that he was not bringing the proper energy into his task. So he decided to see himself in partnership with God. He said, I held on to God as he was doing it. He kept his mind focused on the Most High. He began to see himself as the instrument of spirit. And pretty soon he wrote that a great tranquility came over him and that he was filled and illuminated with joy. Such a great example of just simply having an idea that thrilled him, right? Of what he was doing, which completely changed his actions. Where is an area in your life, maybe something that you do that you're kind of complaining about? I wish I didn't have to do this. I wish I could just get through this and get on to the next thing. What would happen if you brought this same type of attitude, an idea that thrilled you about working together in partnership with the Most High, whatever it might be, that would completely change the energy of the gift of service that you're offering? And what if you just simply realized that it was a gift of service instead of something you just had to get through? How different that would be. When we fill our acts of service with the Spirit, it becomes what A Course in Miracles calls a holy encounter, or what I've also heard of as the breath of heaven. The breath of heaven is moving through us. We're becoming that instrument of heaven on earth. And what are we talking about here? We're talking about love, the energy of love. Dan told me a story of something that really touched him. And I don't often see Dan filled with tears, but this is Dan back here, by the way, for those of you who don't know. This is my husband. As he was telling me this story, his eyes were just filled with tears. It really touched him deeply, which let me know something, is that what was going on there was a holy encounter. And so listen to this story. So there were two men who were going about their business. One was on the side of the road, had a flat tire, and was in the process of changing his tire, an elderly man. And this other man is riding along in his truck and notices this man alongside the road. One man very distinguished looking, the other man kind of a rough and tumble kind of guy. And so the rough and tumble kind of guy got out of his truck, went over to help this man who was changing his tire. And as he bent down to help him, the elderly man looked at him and noticed that he had a prosthesis, that he had lost. He was an amputee. He had lost his leg. And he looked at him and he said, "Are you a veteran?" And the man said, "Yes, I am." And then he took one good look at the elderly man and he said, "I know you. You're General Colin Powell. Oh my gosh." And you know what happened was magical at that point in time. They exchanged stories. The man with this man right here told Colin Powell that he was honored to have served under him. They became friends. They're still texting to this day, I understand. An instant friendship, an act of service that came from the heart. And this is the kind of thing that happens. Sometimes two unlikely meetings, characters, different backgrounds and so on, coming together, becoming friends. Isn't that what heaven on earth is? It's when we all realize we're all in this together. We are all cut out of the same cloth. The divine. We are divine presence. We are individualized expressions of God, or we could say children of the Most High. Whatever works for you. We are that. We're all in this together. We are all brothers and sisters in the spirit. Beautiful. Those are acts of service, and we can feel the difference. We can feel the difference. So, partnering with God, being God's love, even in the smallest acts of joy, becomes service. And it is not only fulfilling for the other person we know, it's fulfilling for the giver as much as the receiver. In fact, we begin to lose sight of who the real giver and the real receiver is because we are so filled with the Spirit, so filled with love, that the act of service becomes fulfillment in and of itself. And so it is a service that we do to the self. We can say to the self with a capital S, whatever it is. It's a service to all, including us. Yet the important part that many people miss when they're on this path is that we must begin with great self-care and what we call radical self-care. We must care for ourselves. It reminds me of what Evelyn Underhill said, is we must first go to the mountain and nourish ourselves spiritually, and then we go into the valley. Or, what they talk about when you get on the plane, they tell you to put the mask on first, yourself first, before you put it on the person next to you. Radical self-care is important. When I was a parenting education instructor, our very first lesson for the parents was self-care. That you cannot be of any service whatsoever to your family if you are tired or burned out. Self-care is absolutely essential. So again, service must be balanced with self-care. Plenty of sleep, rest, and taking care of your own spiritual and physical needs. So, what is ours to do then? That is the question that I posed. I don't know whether it was last week or the week before, but this is another piece that is so important, just to kind of round out this whole thing about service. What is mine to do? What is mine to do is something that empowers, assists, and uplifts. If I am getting involved in something where I am contributing to someone's belief in their own helplessness, then I'm enabling. So it's important that we bring wisdom to our acts of service, that we bring wisdom and that we empower people to be all that they can be, that we help them. In fact, there was a teaching in parenting education is don't do for your children what they can do for themselves. This is the way that we help raise responsible, empowered children, right? Well, it's the same thing when we're adults. It's important that we empower all of those around us to discover the magnificent divine presence that they are in truth, the power of creation that they have within them. So service then, service with all of these components is the manifestation of God as you. It's love, it's joy, it's peace, it's creative intelligence of the Most High expressing as each and every one of us. So I invite you this week to take this idea into your lives, to begin to bring the idea that I'm here in partnership with the Most High. I am here, everything that I'm doing is an act of service. And notice how much more energized and light and free and joyous that you feel this week. And so it is.